If you're one of our haters who are out there watching,
I want to warn people about hypnoporn.
We need to stay meta.
Stop that.
Need new tires? Like, what?
if Jim would shut up for a second.
Oh, high fidelity.
Okay, don't tell me to shut up.
I'm not whining.
I eat doggies. I eat doggies. Feels like a party.
Stop that. It's a war. They have made it so that I cannot be celebrating July 4th.
I don't care. I'm gonna lie. I'm not gonna pretend. I don't care. How do I think? That's what I think. I don't care.
This is 6 Degrees of Stew. You don't need to stay meta, but I'm glad you're here. Welcome back, everybody, to 6 Degrees of Stew. I'm going to be finishing up my series on Dr. Stephen Hassan. And to do so, I found it is Mormon Stories podcast. And it is the most extensive interview that I have found that Dr. Stephen Hassan has done. And it is broken up into 2 parts, and they are both 6 hours. And what's interesting to me about this when I came across this interview, and he does go on this podcast a lot, is it is the most thorough and I think honest and open he has been, and the questions that he fields from Dr. Delan, I believe that's the way he pronounces his name. He'll say it here at the beginning, Delan, in all of his answers that he does present. And I think that's unique because Dr. Stephen Hassan never really goes into depth. Anytime he talks, it's kind of the same regurgitated script every time that he does go into his Moonies stories, his upbringing, and things that he's done. So I thought this was a really good, extensive interview, even though I have thoughts about Mormon Stories podcast and Dr. Delan as well. But it is really good, and I will put in some of my research that I have also found, and definitely it's not going to be the whole 6 hours. But because Spotify allows me to do video podcasting now, I can share this so that people can see it, and it'll be a little bit easier that way. So just a little bit about John Delan, and this is just briefly from his Wikipedia. Like I said, it's something that I could look into. He could probably have his own episode by himself. He's an American podcast host. He holds a PhD in psychology. He founded Mormon Stories podcast, as well as several other podcast blogs and websites. He was an influential early participant in the Mormon blogosphere and blogs at pathos.com. He advocates for LGBT rights and other views outside of the mainstream religious culture. In July of 2015, he was excommunicated from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints Church. So Mormon Stories podcast and how he formed it. He formed it in September of 2005 after he experienced some doubts in his faith and subsequently finding reasons to kind of remain a member of the LDS Church. So he created the podcast, and this is the podcast that we're going to be using to discuss Dr. Stephen Hassan and kind of the basis for where I insert some of my research that I found. He was conflicted about continuing Mormon Stories after he started it, so he stopped it, and then he restarted it a few times. And then in January of 2010, he resumed it, and he focused on faith crises and mental illnesses. And then he had a whole bunch of different guests and stuff like that. But he does have a little bit of controversy, and he's been criticized because he also started what's called Open Stories Foundation. And this is where I said that he really could probably have his own episode if he was in my wheelhouse, and maybe that's something I'll look into later after there's a few other projects I'm working on. But the Open Stories Foundation, it's a 501c3 nonprofit, and he created that in January of 2011. And he's been criticized for the lack of financial transparency and oversight in it. And in 2012, the Salt Lake Tribune reported several former employees of Open Stories Foundation filed a complaint with the IRS, alleging that he and the foundation curated its board membership to boost his compensation and blur lines between donations and personal expenses, amid what they assert was lax supervision. And then this is when I saw this. According to nonprofit tax reports, Dylan's personal annual compensation grew by more than 700%. 700% between 2010 and 2019. His annual compensation of $236,000 and some change in 2019 represented 60% of Open Story Foundation's total earnings from podcast revenues and donors. And then James Patterson, he's a former associate producer for Dylan, wrote in his whistleblower complaint to the IRS that Dylan sees Open Stories Foundation as his and his alone, with an independent board of directors merely a roadblock to him achieving his personal financial goals. So I found that kind of interesting because it is a link kind of to what I'm going to talk about with Dr. Stephen Hassan, how I think he started out with altruistic goals and his mission when he first began his career, and then it turned into a for-profit grift. And it seems to me, and like I said, I'll have to look into Dr. Dylan a little bit more, but just from this brief little insight into him, it seems like he too is of the for-profit grift. So it seems like they are well met. And he talks a little, and just to end this up, just to give a little background on what podcast that Dr. Stephen Hassan is on. He served as a LDS church missionary in Guatemala, and then he said his mission began baptizing up to 700 converts per month using practices he believed to be deceptive. After reporting this to his mission president, Dylan was transferred to an area that stoked his allergies, and he was subsequently sent home. He chose to resume missionary service and was reassigned to finish his 2-year term in Tempe, Arizona. Dylan remained an active member of the LDS Church for the next 20 years. In the spring of 2011, Dylan stated he had become inactive in the church, not attending weekly services, citing an inability to believe some of its claims. In 2014, Dylan was investigated by his local church leaders regarding his online activity, culminating in a request by Dylan for greater privacy. And he has some disciplinary hearings that he didn't have any action. And then in January 2015, Dylan's stake president initiated another disciplinary council, which determined Dylan's online activity constituted apostasy. He was excommunicated for conduct contrary to the laws and order of the church. Now, Dylan did appeal this to the First Presidency in 2015, stating his actions had not met the church's definition of apostasy. And they denied his appeal, so he is excommunicated. So that I just want to give a little background on this podcast because it is 6 hours that Dr. Stephen Hassan's on here, and he has gone on this podcast numerous times. They've done some workshops together, so they are very close and have a working partnership and promote each other. But I did want to just, like I said, talk about that a little bit.
Welcome back to another episode of Mormon Stories Podcast. I am your host for today, John Dylan. It is March 16th, 2023. And we are super excited to have back on Mormon Stories, kind of a legend and a world leader in understanding
He's a legend, all right.
cults and in helping people break free. We have with us Dr. Stephen Hassan. Hey, Stephen, welcome to Mormon Story Studios.
Thanks, John. It's so great to be here and nice to meet you in person, finally.
Yeah, I picked you up at the airport last night, and it's been fun to get to know you a little bit.
Yeah, and we went for a latte, and the Starbucks woman called you out, and me, too.
Called us out, yeah.
That's
so
funny.
I'm getting Steve a latte, and the woman's like, "Are you John Dylan?" And I was like, embarrassed. Yeah. And then she looked over, and she says, "Wait, are you Stephen Hassan?"
It was really funny.
I think there's probably like 3 people in all of Utah that would be able to identify as both, only because we run in different circles sometimes, but that was really fun.
Yeah, and we snapped some selfies, so that was fun, too.
So it's been an honor to bring Stephen Hassan here to Utah. We've wanted to have him come for a long, long time. I'm going to just do a quick little intro about a couple things, and then we're going to jump in. Today's episode is going to be all about Stephen's story. So tomorrow we're going to have him back to talk about his work with cults and with people leaving cults, and then with people trying to heal and grow from having been in cults or high demand religions. But just to give you a quick couple things about Stephen, The book that we brought him on to discuss before, the book that I think if there's one book you read from Stephen, I'm going to recommend it's this one.
I have read this book. I've read the old one and I've read the updated one. And I will discuss this too. I just don't know if I'll insert it here or later on. I haven't watched this in a while because it's so lengthy. So we'll continue on and see where they go. But I have read the book and it's interesting, to say the least, the pieces you pick out if you really pay attention.
On Combating Cult Mind Control, the #1 best-selling guide to protection, rescue, and recovery from destructive cults. Stephen is the founder or the author or the originator of the BITE model, behavior, information, thoughts, and emotions, which is a really valuable way, along with his influence continuum, to evaluate undue influence or unhealthy organizations or relationships. And by the way,
we'll go over those too, more in depth, and where Stephen got those from, and how it's a simplistic model. And it is maybe a useful tool for some people and, for media when they need a quick talking head on. But there's thoughts on that, and we'll discuss that in a little while.
His work applies not just to churches and religions, but to governments, to educational institutions, to gurus, to yoga instructors, to multi-level marketing
cults
scams,
everywhere,
to even podcasters. Like it's applicable. It's applicable in your marriage. It was your relationship with your parents. It's all about just coercion and undue influence, and learning about how to deal with it. There's a second book that I've read this several books. A second book that we're going to be referencing today and tomorrow is Freedom of Mind, Helping Loved Ones Leave Controlling People, Cults, and Beliefs. He has a third book called The Cult of Trump, which we're not going to be covering today and tomorrow, just to avoid polarization and getting distracted on Mormon stories. I try and stay away from talking about politics, but
he does do this. I've watched other Mormon Story podcast episodes just to get a feel from how he talks to Dr. Stephen Hassan and how he talks to other people. He does not like to talk about politics because he wants to keep the audience, I guess, open, whether that's self-preservation for his audience and growth, or if it's really a true belief that he does hold so that he can reach more people. I don't know. It's really hard to tell. Like I said, I haven't studied Dr. DeLon enough to know, but just reading about his nonprofit, I have thoughts now rolling around in my head.
Steve would tell you it's one of his most important books. So you guys can check that out if you want. We won't be covering that today or tomorrow. But we're also bringing Stephen here to speak to Mormons and post-Mormons along the Wasatch Front. So in the description on both YouTube and Facebook right now, there's several links. Tonight, Stephen's going to be speaking at the Lost and Found Club, which is led by Chelsea Homer, dear friend of mine. She has a Facebook group called the Faith Journey Meetups, which is like almost 10,000 post-Mormon women who provide support to each other. Stephen's speaking tonight. There's still tickets available for that. If you want to click and see Steve tonight, I think it's in Sandy, but check out the Lost and Found Club link for that. Saturday, Stephen's speaking at Thrive. There's two, Thrive Unite is happening like in 20 cities across the world. Stephen's going to be speaking at Lehigh Thrive in the morning in Lehigh, Utah.
Not the Thrive MLM, if any of you guys are familiar with that. That's not what it is.
Opportunities you have to see Steve speak. There are links to Thrive Unite also in the show notes right now in the description. And then finally, Stephen and I are hosting an all-day workshop in Alpine, Utah this Sunday, and there are still tickets available for that if you want to see us do our thing for a full day, something we've never done before. So we're really excited about that. And then the last thing, the most important thing I think for Steve, other than you buying right now his books, which I encourage you all to do.
Don't.
Stephen has his thoughts and feelings kind of like 40 years. How many years worth of work have you done in
now
cults?
47, John.
47 years working in cults. He's put together a foundational course for clinicians, but also for you and for your friends, for coaches, for anyone who thinks they could benefit from his 47 years of expertise on cults. I highly recommend it. In the show notes and descriptions right now, there's
I
a
do
link,
not recommend
and
it.
you can purchase the course. And it's a way to support him and his lifelong dedication to supporting people escaping from cults and high-demand religions and then rebuilding healthy, happy lives. Stephen also works as a coach or as a...
I happen to know
he has a
somebody
PhD.
who was doing
he
things for the
has
Negative
done the
48 cult,
graduate
and
work
Stephen didn't have
in
time for
mental
that.
health.
Here you can see the example I was referring to. This is Charlie Campbell, posted on Twitter April 4th of 2024. Been over a year reporting, but my deep dive on the Unification Church is finally live. Very grateful for all those who graciously shared their experiences. And within this article, Sarah Hightower was quoted, and Stephen Hassan took umbrage with this, very great umbrage, and posted, as a former leader in New York in the 1970s and whose books were bestsellers in Japan, I wonder why you didn't interview me for this piece, but instead quoted Sarah Hightower, who I am told by fellow researchers is a nefarious troll. Freedomofmind.com is how to learn more about Moon. And then he goes on. Within this, Karma, who is a very good friend of mine and who has worked tirelessly within the Negative 48 cult and does to this day, and seeks no praises, no accolades, or anything, does this on her own time, doesn't receive any money at all, and just does it because it's the right thing to do. Has been doing this for a very long time. And members of the Negative 48 cult did reach out to Dr. Stephen Hassan for help. And what did Dr. Stephen Hassan do? He sent them to buy his book. And I provided the screenshot there, and it shows her commenting to him. Remember the families of Negative 48, the ones who tried to reach out for help and you didn't respond to.
But he works helping people transition out of unhealthy cults or organizations, but also dealing with family members with personal assistance, Zoom calls, interventions to help people who are in need, whether it's you or dear friends or family. So that's my introduction, Steve. He's also been on every single media outlet you can think of: Oprah,
unfortunately,
Bill O'Reilly, CNN, CS, ABC, New York Times, Wall Street Journal. You really can't mention a prominent media outlet probably that Stephen hasn't been on multiple times. So he's a real global thought leader. And Stephen, what did I miss, or what would you want to add to your intro?
Well, I would just say that I got interested in the subject because I was recruited into the Moonies cult in '74. So if we add in my 2.5 years in the Moonies, then I'm going to be 49 years of doing this. But really what propelled me,
you can't
and
count
has
the time you're in the
propel
cult as
me,
doing
that,
helping people.
It happened to me, and I had experienced a radical personality change and cut off from my family and friends, and became a right-wing fascist person who was capable of violence if I was ordered to do so.
Wow. So they were training you to sword fight, you said?
Yeah, they basically trained me to die or kill on command, and they trained me that if I allowed a doubt,
I'm sorry,
when I
they
was
were
given
training me to
an
sword
order
fight.
by
That
my
gets me.
superior, that Satan was going to be invading me, a la Exorcist. And so, whatever I was told to do, I did. And it's incredibly frightening. And I was deprogrammed. We'll do that tomorrow. But the beginning was just trying to figure out what the hell happened to me, and researching, and some of the top people saying, you really should study psychology and explain it further. So I owe my family for helping to rescue me out of the Moonies after a near-fatal van crash. And February of 2024 will be 50 years, my 50-year anniversary.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a good preview for today, because today we're not going to be dealing into the clinical or the procedural or the structural ideas around cults and his life body of work. Today, we're just going to do a traditional Mormon story where Stephen tells his story. We're live streaming it because we wanted to promote his upcoming events this weekend.
Yep.
And Samantha Shelley from Zeph on the Shelf will be joining us in just a bit. we notified her last minute that we wanted her to help co-host. But we're gonna try and tell your story in kind of maybe a 2 to 3 hour engagement. So
never been done before,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I'll try to calm
It
my
hasn't,
nerves.
and that's why I found this interesting.
And I just want to say that, like, your story deserves high quality audio and video, and so that's why I'm really grateful we were able to fly you here and spend today doing this. So
Yeah,
thank
no,
you.
I'm excited, and we'll do more tomorrow.
Yeah. Okay. So let's jump in, Stephen. Normally I say, how does your Mormon story begin? But you don't necessarily have a Mormon story, do you?
Nope.
So tell us just a tiny bit about your parents, whatever you're comfortable sharing.
Sure.
And did they have a religious upbringing or a cult upbringing? And then did they raise you with any, religious or spiritual foundation? Let's start there.
Okay, so I was born in 1954 in Flushing, Queens, New York. I have two older sisters, Thea and Stephanie. So I was the youngest of three. My mom got her master's and became an art teacher in middle school when I guess turned 12. So she was like a homemaker, and then she became a teacher and an art teacher. My dad had been a musician growing up. He actually played trumpet in the Army during World War II, but went into his father's hardware store business. When he met my mom, he wanted to have more stability than being a musician, I'm told. So I grew up going to Hassan Hardware in Ozone Park, Queens. And I grew up in a small attached house on 172nd Street near Union Turnpike. It's just opposite St. John's University. And St. John's is a Catholic college big on basketball, and I grew up with the Knicks and basketball. I'm 6 feet tall, but I love that sport. So I grew up playing basketball. I was a very introverted kid. I was told by my mom that in the beginning, they were worried that I had a developmental problem because I wasn't doing baby talk. And then when I started talking, I was talking in sentences. And then they realized I was bright, I guess. And I love to read. I was an introvert. And so I was reading, textbook major books, even when I was 7, 8, 9 years old. So
He was reading textbook chapter books when he was 7, 8, or 9 years old. I don't know how many people out there have listened to a lot of Alex Jones or InfoWars, or if you Knowledge Fight is a better way to take in that material. But it's the same thing that Alex Jones says. I was so smart. I was reading all these books when I was a young little boy. Look at me. I'm this, bright little man, and I could read these books. So it's very interesting and telling that he is talking about it in the same manner that Alex Jones does.
I was kind of interested in big topics. So what else?
Do you know? So you have Jewish ancestry, right?
Yes, forgive me. So,
and even before your parents, do you know about your Jewish ancestry prior to your parents?
Yes, good question. So I'll answer that by saying my mom grew up Orthodox Jewish. So my grandparents
also
were
in Queens?
Orthodox. They were in Bronx.
Okay.
My dad was much more of a cultural Jew and not as observant. But my mom lit Shabbat candles. We had a kosher household and separating meat things, and no shellfish, no pork in the house, and different dishes for milk and meat types of things. I went to temple on Shabbat. I was bar mitzvahed. I really didn't like the Judaism I was taught as a child. It didn't make sense to me.
Why not?
I just couldn't relate relate to the notion of divine being that was angry and judgmental and would deliberately harden Pharaoh's heart in order to, or do plagues and kill firstborns. Like, what? Like, that was so bizarro for me.
And you tuned into that as a kid.
Oh, I was reading philosophy books as a child. So by the time I was
just to pick up on that, he says again, I was reading philosophy books as a child. So he's reading philosophy books as a child. He's saying this. And this is another thing, and I hate to keep throwing up Alex Jones, but Alex Jones always talks about being in this household that was surrounded by Bircher books and all these other materials that he was reading at that age. And that, if you're taking in these materials at that age and you don't necessarily know what they mean, and, your brains aren't fully formed, and nobody's explaining the materials to you, that can kind of have an effect.
Was bar mitzvah, I was very identified as a Jew, and I should add that I've had a very weird experience because my last name is spelled Hassan, so many people mispronounce it as Hassan. And that was the name of the cousin of Muhammad of the Muslim religion. And so many Jews thought I was an Arab, or they thought I was a Muslim. And so I experienced discrimination. And after 9/11.
Pay attention to this story too. I found this interesting that he was discussing he faced discrimination just because of the way his last name was pronounced. But everybody would have known him growing up. I don't know. Like, this story gets really weird to me. And like, he's going to talk about 9/11 too. And this was, I don't know.
And I had trouble getting on an airplane because of the spelling of
Dr.
my
Stephen
last
Hassan
name.
had trouble getting on an airplane.
I went to Israel to do an archaeological dig in the Negev desert at Tel Beersheba, or Beersheba, which is in the Bible. And they the Israelis almost didn't let me on the airplane because they thought I might be an Arab terrorist or something. So it's always been interesting to me, but
Dr.
also
Hassan,
I've always been a human rights kind of guy and really believe in things like honesty and justice and human rights.
We're going to talk about Dr. Stephen Hassan and his support of human rights upcoming further along in this video. But first, I thought I'd touch on his honesty and his willingness to spread unfounded rumors. First up, we have a tweet from November 8th of 2022. It is in response to Jimmy Kimmel Live saying, Dr. Oz told Jimmy an awful story about Donald Trump. Stephen Hassan responds, that's nothing, Jimmy. I spoke with an MD who told me Trump asked him for a referral for a doctor for antibiotic-resistant gonorrhea. Trump got his referral and sent the doctor a scrawled thank you note. I asked the doctor if he saved it. Unfortunately, he said he threw it in the trash. Then we have a tweet from March 20th of 2024. He's responding to a Blue Anon account, Duty to Warn. Newsweek, there's overwhelming evidence that Donald Trump is suffering from dementia. Stephen Hassan responds, I would add that I'm aware from a trustworthy source that Trump has been suffering from antibiotic-resistant STDs due to his sex addiction and lack of use of condoms. Then we have a tweet from September 8th of 2024. I have been told by an MD in person that Trump asked him for a referral to a doctor who could help him with antibiotic-resistant gonorrhea. I have respected this doctor's wishes to not name him, but no one is raising the issue that Trump's obvious deterioration might be connected to his sex addiction and not using condoms. And Dr. Stephen Hassan is very upset because nobody's raising the issue of him spreading this unfounded rumor from some unnamed doctor who told him about this note, and the doctor did not save it. Unfortunately, he threw it in the trash. This is a mental health expert who is a cult expert speculating about if Donald Trump is using condoms, is sex addicted, and perhaps has antibiotic-resistant gonorrhea. But, he believes in honesty and truthfulness. Sure you do, Stephen.
So that was my early childhood.
We'll get into that later.
So theologically, the belief in God the belief in Judaism is the Jewish people as like God's chosen people, the belief in like a literal Adam and Eve and a literal Abraham, Isaac and Jacob, and a global flood. You know, how did you, Jonah and the whale, how did you square those very traditional Jewish teachings? You know,
so you're asking me
child.
when I was 5, 10 or so?
Yeah.
I did not believe in a literal Adam and Eve story at all. That didn't make sense because I grew up with science and evolution, and so that, you know, they were myths. And my education as a Jew was that we were chosen, but we were chosen to be servants, and we were not better than others. We just had an obligation, a special obligation to do what's called tikkun olam, which is repair the world. It's a very important value that I grew up with, that I still continue to believe in, that we have an obligation as human beings to not just take care of ourselves, but to take care of others, to make the world a little bit better place.
Would you have been taught by your rabbis to not take the Torah literally?
Absolutely. Jews do not take the Torah literally.
Okay.
Period. Well, that's never been the case.
Okay, I don't want to. I'll say Jew-splain you, but
do whatever you want.
Like, it's my understanding. There's ultra-Orthodox Judaism, there's conservative Judaism or Orthodox Judaism, and I know those are even separate things, conservative versus Orthodox. But then there's like Reform Judaism and Reconstructionist Judaism.
There's a whole spectrum, yes.
And so wouldn't the more conservative branches of Judaism take the Bible literally as
not at all
document? What?
Not even the Orthodox or the ultra-Orthodox.
Really?
The old religion was like temple sacrifice of animals, and when the temple was destroyed, Judaism transformed to be a rabbinic interpretation religion.
Which means what?
It means that the few people, mostly guys, to my understanding, mostly male, patriarchal, it was an oral tradition where they would memorize Torah. It eventually got written down on parchment as the Torah scrolls. But from its ever since the temple was destroyed, it's all about rabbinic interpretation of what was in the Torah. And honestly, a lot of things have been mistranslated, especially by Christians and others that have nothing to do with Judaism. They just don't get the core concepts even of Judaism.
Well, I
can't comment on any of this because I really don't know
like
the ins and outs of
rabbi
Judaism.
Doesn't believe that Moses was a historical figure.
Oh no, they would believe that Moses was a historical figure, and God spoke at Sinai in many different religions. They would believe that, but they don't look at the Torah without rabbinic interpretation. Okay. Read the words in Hebrew and say this is the literal, immutable, inerrant word of God that can't be changed.
But there would be a branch of Jews somewhere that believed in a literal Adam and Eve and in a literal global flood.
I would agree that for me, so I believe in a continuum, and there are ultra-Orthodox people that would look at me and say, I'm not a Jew because I eat shellfish,
right?
Or because I drive to my temple on Shabbat. Right. And for them, doing anything that is work, because they take that verse literally.
Yeah.
But my rabbi drives to temple in order to lead services, and for him, it's work to do a service.
Professional podcast here.
Or whatever we can talk about where I've been out for the last 15, 20 years, because it's evolved.
Right.
Because I pretty much was disillusioned with Judaism. And by the time I went through my bar mitzvah, I was just like, okay, well, I'll play on my temple's basketball team, but that was kind of where I was at.
So what made you become disillusioned with Judaism? What were the main pillars of your disillusionment?
So you need to understand, my father worked on Shabbat. It was his big day of the week in the hardware store, and I was brought in to work with him because he wanted me not to be an introvert, and he wanted me to learn the importance of strangers and selling them paint or screws or fixing windows and all of those kinds of things. So it was my mom's side of the family where like lighting the candles and celebrating the fact that there was a day that was supposed to be not about the worldly work, but a day of family and good food and napping and going to temple, yes, but a day of contemplation and soul restoration. And I still love the idea of Shabbat. And I think, and I do Torah study every Saturday morning.
But going back to then.
Yeah. No, back to then, my childhood. So it was interesting because my father's side was secular and cool, and my mother's side was very religious. And I loved my grandfather, and he would put on tefillin, which is a prayer leather scroll of dedication. So he would go in the basement by our washing machine and daven and do his prayer. And for him, it was really important. And my mom would pray for things. And so there was this with her, much more emotionally close than with my dad growing up.
So given your mom loved it so much, what led?
He is very close with his mom, and he did have a strained relationship with his father emotionally, and he always sought his approval. And there's an article that I'll quote from later on from his sister Thea, where she discusses, I believe it's when their father's dying, that he finally tells Stephen that he's kind of made it and that he loves him. So he was always seeking his father's approval. I was mistaken. It was when his father was in a nursing home. And this article is from Slate Magazine and is dated June 1st of 2021. And the title of it was The Man Who Wants to Free Trump Supporters from Mind Control. Steve Hassan was once in a group widely regarded as a cult. He's since spent decades working to rescue other cult members, but now some wonder if he's gone too far. And within this article, this is where I picked up on his father and seeking validation. Hassan has spent his career trying to prevent people from going through what he went through, but it's also been a career spent searching for validation, the kind he once sought from the Unification Church and in the years since from academics, the media, and his own family. Quote, when people praise his work or demonstrate an interest, that means a lot to him, Landau said. That's his wife. Hassan says his own father's approval trickled in slowly over the years, first when he got his master's degree and later when he published his first book. Only when his father was in his 90s and in a nursing home did he give Hassan a full blessing. Quote, well, you turned into a mensch. You turned into someone I could be proud of. His sister Thea remembers him saying. He said, quote, I love you, Hassan recalls.
Led to your disillusionment? What were the top 3-5 things illusion with your Jewish upbringing?
It's a very interesting point. No one's asked me this.
Were they mean? Were they strict? Did you just not like the doctrine?
It wasn't strict, and I had friends who weren't kosher. They were Jewish culturally, but they weren't observant. And somewhere around, I don't know, 10, 11, we would eating out at Chinese restaurants, and I was exposed to pork, and I would eat it, and nothing bad happened to me. And shellfish, I kind of like scallops and shrimp and lobster. So it started, culinarily for me to be not following kosher laws. But otherwise, I didn't feel like it resonated with my sense of the divine. That said, I always had a faith in God from my childhood, and I still do. but it's not this notion of a anthropomorphized guy, floating in the clouds with a beard, who's a judge and who has anger and is going to wipe out the world. That just never made sense to me, and it felt more like it was a Greek or Roman gods kind of orientation to me than what made sense to me. And of course, I want to emphasize that I grew up post-Holocaust, and while I didn't lose any family, this was something from my earliest memory, that the Nazis rounded up so many people and killed them. And because we were Jewish, even if we didn't believe religiously, so that was an important part of my psyche, was that we were a small minority religion, and that a lot of people blamed us for a lot of the world problems.
It's true.
And therefore we should
Still
stick
are.
together, against, the
Unfortunately.
masses, so to speak.
So it sounds like theologically, the idea of a anthropomorphic God didn't make sense to
Never
you.
made sense to me.
You didn't like kosher, the dietary.
It wasn't that I didn't like
Didn't
it.
make sense.
It didn't.
I was raised
I didn't
Catholic, and I
feel
didn't like muddy
guilty
on Fridays.
if I
that.
went out and
That was
had a
bullshit.
White Castle hamburger or whatever.
And with the Holocaust, did you just feel like if we're the chosen, it doesn't seem like a great honor to be chosen? Was that part of it? Just like, if we're God's chosen people and humanity keeps punishing us so severely, maybe I'm not super interested in being one of God's chosen.
So I really want to emphasize that in my experience and the people that I know growing up, the notion of being chosen is not the same as outsiders who project that we think we're superior and therefore we should run everything.
Right. That's not what I meant. Sorry. I just meant that there's got to be some irony to the idea of a chosen people, but then to see the severe persecution the Jews have experienced for millennia. I'm just saying, you mentioned the Holocaust as I talked to you about disillusionment. Was the Holocaust,
that made me want to identify more as a Jew.
Oh, okay. Not less.
Not less.
So the Holocaust didn't really factor into your disillusionment.
No.
Okay.
There's a few other things I want to just say about my memory of my childhood and how I thought of things. So one of the messages that I received is your education they can't take that away from you. If the Nazis show up, they could take your house, they could take your art, they can take your car, but they can't take your mind. So that was something that still is really, really important. And the other thing I want to emphasize was that one of the most important holidays growing up Jewish is the liberation from bondage story from Pharaoh. And I believe that, this getting together, having matzah, it's called Passover, to remember being a slave, to remember that, people didn't want to leave the comfort of Egypt and, this whole scary thing. But this notion that people were enslaved but didn't know about it. And we can talk more about this tomorrow if you want, but it's a very important theme also, I believe. And when I reflect back on my life journey, that this is a liberation from cult mind control story that I grew up with, and I got into a cult.
Okay, so do you, we'll be talking about the influence continuum, but do you consider your Jewish upbringing where do you put that on the influence continuum? With acknowledging that our audience doesn't even really have an introduction to the influence continuum, but just pretend they did. Where would you put your upbringing on the influence continuum?
So because it's a continuum to ethical to unethical, it was much more over to the ethical informed consent. I never felt coerced to believe I had to go to services. It was more like a social thing to do with my grandfather when he visited, or, I typically, I never went with my dad to services except during my bar mitzvah or something like that. Was a marking of becoming an adult.
Yeah.
When you're 13 and you read from, give a little devar or a teaching. And it's like public speaking practice in the Jewish religion. But I was always interested in ideas, many different kinds of ideas, and I never felt constrained by my family or my culture or my religion that I had to be in a box.
Yeah. Okay. So was your mom or your mom's side of the family frustrated when she noticed you were kind of distancing yourself from the faith? Was there any family drama about apostasy in Mormon language or disaffection? Zero. Was she even sad to see you becoming secular?
I don't think so. I think, well, my mom was one of these women who was saintly, if I can use that Christian-esque term. She was just unconditionally loving and creative and kind and believed, the best in people. She was a bit of a worrywart, which is her parents. They worried about everything. So I picked up some of that worry gene, I think, from that side of the family. No, they just wanted me to be happy and safe, and they wanted me to, I was bullied a bit in elementary school because I was a bit of a nerd, I guess, to use that language. But I was good at school, so some people may have felt intimidated or, jealous or whatever. But, things came easily to me in school. In fact, I was pretty bored in school, so I was always like reading books.
Right. Overall, then, do you feel like Judaism provided you with a valuable structure to grow up? And when I say
absolutely,
that, like identity, community, morality, was it a good container for you to develop within?
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I really do. I about my life experience to other people. And the only other person who asked me about Judaism was Joe Rogan. I know I'm jumping out of frame to the 2000.
I watched the Joe Rogan interview, and I'm going to put some of that in here, probably right about here. I'll break in and put in some of this Joe Rogan stuff. But he loves this Joe Rogan interview and the connection that he and Joe Rogan made. He has even tweeted at Joe Rogan, like, hey, Joe, remember when I was on your show and you interviewed me? How about having me on again? Like, he just really loves this Joe Rogan thing that he did. And yeah, their conversation, it's interesting. So we'll take a look at that as well. I pulled a sampling of some of the tweets to Joe Rogan that he posted and some advertising, like him being with Joe Rogan or photos. Just a sampling of it. This is from the 18th of June of 2023 at 3:43 p.m. Hi, Joe. You had me on your show in 2015 to discuss cults and invited me back on. However, when my Simon & Schuster book, The Cult of Trump, came out, you declined. I was on the Megyn Kelly show and would enjoy being back on with you to discuss authoritarian cult control. Then he posts their video interview, and that is from the tweet went out October of 24. Then he posts another tweet from April 19th of 2022, and it's about him being on the Joe Rogan Experience. Then we have 1, 2, 3 pictures of him and Joe together. One of them says, finally found that picture for you naysayers and to remind Joe Rogan, I guess, that they had done the interview together. We have another one. Tune in to the Joe Rogan Show tonight. Special guest, Steve Hassan. Then we have Joe Rogan Experience number 680, Steve Hassan. Then we have one at Joe Rogan. So sorry to hear you got COVID, but didn't you get vaccinated? Good to hear you're about to get real medicine, monoclonal antibodies. But what's with the other crap you put in your body? Invite me back on with you, please, and let's talk. I mean, he's just real thirsty to talk to Joe Rogan and be on his show again. But you can take a look at them. I have them posted if you're watching the video episode of this podcast, but they are there for the sourcing.
2015, but when he heard I was a Jew, he asked me questions for 30 minutes because he had knew nothing about Judaism. And he was shocked that a cult expert who knew, was into Judaism. And,
but wouldn't you put a lot of religions in that category then, that classification of undue influence?
Right. So you asked me, is Judaism a cult? The answer is there are Jewish cults for sure, and there are lots of other Jewish temples and affiliations that are not destructive cults.
So what would you consider them?
Them meaning
the positive ones.
The positive ones. I belong to Temple Beth Zion in Brookline, Massachusetts. And
powerful Brookline.
You would appreciate
I grew up in
that
Newton.
my rabbi wrote the big book of Jewish humor, and he was a comedian for most of his adult career. He became
this is
a
true.
rabbi
I looked
later
it up.
on.
What's his name?
Moshe Waldox, and he cracks jokes even during Yom Kippur, and he's minor rabbi. It's not. It's gay friendly, women centered, social justice. But we love to sing, we love to chant, we love to daven, we love to do.
What's a daven?
Daven is religious prayer.
Oh, okay.
Going through the Siddur and learning Torah. I love to go to Torah study. It resonates for me. In terms of my spiritual path. That said, I've also studied Buddhism, and I have a teacher who's teaching me a Korean form of meditation and movement. He's a martial artist, by the way.
Oh, yeah? Korean martial arts? What kind?
He's a swordsman.
Swordsman? So he does like kendo or something? Something along those lines?
The real,
Korean version of it?
Like the real sword thing.
Well, kendo is a real art of sword. They just use bamboo sticks because they don't want to cut each other's legs off. It is, yes. Yeah.
I learned a little bit of that in the Moonies. They were teaching.
In the Moonies, they teach you kendo? Really? Exciting. It's nice they teach you a little something. It's probably just in case they have to take over the world and everybody's out of bullets.
Well, I hope we have a chance to chat about the Moonies at some point.
We will definitely chat about the Moonies. So would you say you're by doing this, being involved in an organized religion, an ancient organized religion, and a sect that you feel is positive, would it be just more of a community of philosophy and maybe just a nice group of people that?
Well, it is a nice group of people, and we are independent, although we're influenced by the renewal movement of Zalman Schachter Sholami. But we're trying to.
What does that mean?
That's the name of a spiritual leader, rabbi who passed away, who basically said, and he liked to smoke pot, by the way.
I like him already.
He talked about like updating the traditions for the modern time, and that we need. The whole point is growth and connection to other beings in a loving, compassionate way. It's not about being exclusive. It's not about putting other people down to be on your path. It's about awareness and consciousness.
So I wanted to talk about Zalman Schachter Sholami. He passed away in 2014, a Hasidic trained rabbi ordained in the Lubavitch movement, who broke with Orthodox Judaism beginning in the 1960s and founded his own organization, the B'nai or Religious Fellowship, which he described in an article entitled Toward Order or B'nai Or. B'nai Or means sons or children of light and was taken from the Dead Sea Scrolls material, where the sons of light battle the sons of darkness. He envisioned B'nai or as a semi-monastic ashram-type community based upon various communal models prevalent in the 1960s and 70s. This community never materialized as he envisioned it, but B'nai Or did produce a number of important leaders in the renewal movement. It also produced the B'nai Or newsletter, a quarterly magazine that presented articles on Jewish mysticism, Hasidic stories, and his philosophy. The masthead of this publication read, B'nai Or is a Jewish fellowship established for the service through prayer, Torah, celebration, meditation, tradition, and mysticism. We serve as a center to facilitate people in the pursuit of Judaism as a spiritual way of life. He was strongly influenced by Sufism of Islam and Buddhism and translated some of the prayers into Hebrew. He also focused more on urban, sustainable living than rural culture and suggested, for instance, interconnected basements of houses in urban neighborhoods that would create collective spaces, especially for holidays, while providing the level of privacy secular life had encouraged. Some of these ideas have influenced urban economics. In 1985, after the first National Kala Conference gathering in Radnor, Pennsylvania, the name was changed from Benai or Panai, or Faces of Light, to reflect the more egalitarian perspective of the rising feminist movement. Together with such colleagues as Arthur Waska, he broadened the focus of his organization. In 1993, it merged with the Shalom Center, founded by Waskow, to become ALEPH, Alliance for Jewish Renewal. In 1979, Waskow had founded a magazine called Menorah, which explored and encouraged many creative, ritual, and social issues from a Jewish perspective. It was in this publication that Waskow coined the term Jewish renewal. In 1986, Menorah merged with the Benai, or newsletter, to become New Menorah, now available online through ALEPH. The new version of the publication addressed Jewish feminism, the nuclear arms race, new forms of prayer, social justice, etc. Several of the early New Menorah issues explored gay rights and became an important catalyst for opening this discussion in more mainstream synagogues. The executive director of ALEPH said in 2016 that 50 Jewish renewal communities had been established in the United States, Canada, Latin America, Europe, and Israel. By this time, the beginnings of institutionalization were in place in the form of the nonprofit organization ALEPH, Alliance for Jewish Renewal, the Rabbinical Association OALAH, and an increasingly formalized but non-accredited rabbinic ordination program.
Well, that sounds like a very healthy perspective.
I don't think I would be part of a spiritual community after everything I've been through that wasn't super healthy and giving me more than I was taking from me.
Are you allowed to eat bacon in that group?
People eat bacon. I personally don't eat bacon. My wife loves bacon, but we're not. We drive to temple. I live several miles away. My rabbi drives to temple.
Even on Saturday?
On Shabbat.
Whoa.
But it's more important to show up at temple than to, than to miss temple.
Than to follow some mystical, ancient
all of the
view of cars.
All of the rules should serve the spiritual purpose and not the other way around. That people are just compressed into this rigidity of conformity and obedience and guilt and shame. That we're not into guilt and shame. We're into joy and love and laughter and helping one another.
That sounds very ideal as far as cults go.
I think so.
So it's a cult. It's just a really good one. It's a good.
Some people in Boston call it a cult, and I'm a happily say I've been there for 17 years from the very beginning of his invitation to become a rabbi there. Worship make the agenda. It's not top down, a dictatorship type thing. It's the membership. And
what's the downs?
What's the downs? There was some personality power conflicts between an assistant rabbi and Moshe. There was some other,
Isn't that always how it works? There's always some power struggle.
Human beings, we're, imperfect. And the key is, if somebody calls you on your shit, that you step back and you listen.
Language,
and
Stephen.
You reflect. And you either correct your behavior or you don't. And if you don't, and if you're a part of a community like that in a leadership role, then they ask you to leave.
And so that was what was going on there.
In that particular case, I think she wanted more say-so. She didn't want to be the assistant rabbi. I don't know
See, it's so weird to me that you're like an anti-cult guy, but this is clearly, at the very least, a very strong ideology with some pretty rigid sort of classifications of things. Is that fair to say?
I mean, Judaism as I practice
the one that you, It seems like a weird way to get this started.
Nobody makes me. It's fine. It's not the typical interview that I'm asked to do. But then again, I didn't expect this to be typical.
What is it? Well, it's not. It's just conversation, really.
Yeah.
Try not to interview people.
Oh, okay. For me, I just want to grow, and I like being part of a group that's bigger than myself, particularly one that's interested in helping Boston. We're members of the Greater Boston Interfaith Organization, where we're fighting for justice, to raise minimum wage, to help get rid of egregious banking fees on immigrants. We bring in pro-Palestinian peace activists to speak. We bring in Steve Hassan to speak about cults. All kinds of interesting programming. And
yeah, they're the two most fascinating interviews, I think. This one
in my
and the Joe Rogan.
But my recollections
all the rest
were really, I was into,
same stuff
TV
Stephen always
was
says.
happening. We had a black and white TV, and I spent a lot of time watching all kinds of really. Yeah, but I also was into combat and some of the post-World War II war things. In fact, we talk about child parts that I had grown out of that got recruited to become a Moonie, but that we can talk about tomorrow.
No, we're talking about the Mooney stuff today.
Oh, we are. Okay.
So,
but I was not to sound extreme, but I was reading.
Here we go, the big books again.
Like postgraduate philosophy books when I was 7, 8, 9 years of age. So I was just thinking in a way like, why isn't the world better?
Yeah.
Like, why are things so screwed up? This is not the way it should be. Why is there racism? Why is there injustice?
So how do you go from what it sounds like
reading postgraduate books at 7, 8,
Jewish
9 years old on philosophy?
Take us through, like, it would seem like you were given a good upbringing. You loved science, you loved to learn, and you were curious and had a great upbringing. Take us to the path that leads you to join a cult.
I'd skipped 8th grade. I was an extra honor student. I was a creative writing major at Queens College.
Humble brag. See that? Just kidding. So you were an honor student?
I was reading Plato when I was 8. I was into utopian novels when I was 9. But aside from that, of ethical...
There we go again. I was reading Plato at 8. And, hold on.
Minimum wage to help.
I was still...
Systematic, which I later learned major at Queens College.
Humble brag. See that?
Here we go.
So you were an honor student? I was reading Plato when I was 8. I was into utopian novels when I was 9. But aside from that,
utopian novels.
Yeah, I was wanting an ideal world and looking around at what I saw in the media, and the Russians were going to nuke us, and already I was sensitized to global climate change way back then.
Well, so
what made you vulnerable or interested?
So nobody joins a cult knowing what it is. I need to state that categorically. So for me, I was in the last draft lottery to go to Vietnam. I being very like, we have to fight evil, and we fought Hitler in World War II. And then, of course, the communism threat, we would get under our wooden desks because Russia might nuke us at any moment. So that kind of mentality. John F. Kennedy was assassinated. Martin Luther King was assassinated. We were in the Vietnam War. This didn't make a lot of sense. We were not doing anything but harming a lot of civilians and spending a lot of money. And that made no sense, etc. And I discovered I liked to write poetry. So I found my voice. I think it was in 3rd grade. I had a teacher who encouraged me to write and to do art. And so that's kind of, Steve was, and it's an art form where it's kind of free form trance writing. like words that come to you, and you put them down, and then you reshape them to communicate a feeling or a thought or an idea or a series of things. So that's kind of where I was at. I had skipped 8th grade because if you're in New York City, you could if you scored high on the test. So I was 17 when I graduated high school.
And what year was that?
I want to say 71.
Okay. My
father said, being the male child, both my sisters got married very young in their lives. And my mom was an art teacher. My father said, "You want to take the business over? It's a good business. It's, you can make a great living. It's very secure." And I'm like, I can't see myself selling, being in a hardware business, thread and pipe and pumping kerosene into to alcohol bottles, which I did in the back. And so he said, I have, high blood pressure, varicose veins, and mom, your sisters have left the house. I think I'm going to sell the business. And I was like, great. He said, well, then you have to go to college or get a job. Like, those are your options. And in retrospect, that was an error. If I could go back in time and tell my parents there was no such thing as a gap year back then, I would have said, don't rush them into college. And I'll also say that I had, in retrospect, a very insulated experience growing up, because all my friends, all of my cultural interactions were with fellow Jews, and I knew nothing about Christianity or any other world religion. And it wasn't.
It's going to come up, and I don't know if it's in this interview or in the next episode, or if it's in my research, because I've been digging into Dr. Stephen Hassan for so many months here. But he talks about being isolated and everything, but there are stories, and again, I don't know if it's in the next episode, or somewhere else in my research that I'm going to put in here. But he talks about going cross country. It's across the United States with a friend. They go up to Canada, and he goes and does some other things. So he wasn't this isolated, sheltered person. He was experiencing more of the world than I had, even, as a young person. So he was out there and doing things. He wasn't this sheltered, naive, never saw the world, never experienced other people. I mean, yeah, he was out there. And I think he may tell the story here.
It wasn't until I was in college that I got to start talking with people and learning about all these other religions. And I wish that I had been taught in my Hebrew school. As
I find this interesting too, because he's been reading collegiate textbooks on philosophy and different subject matters since he was 7, 8, and 9. He skipped a grade in school.
Say, hey,
because he was so smart.
Of different paths to being spiritual. So there was some ignorance about that played into it. But the truth of the matter is, I was not a joiner. Like, I think I was in my 6th grade chorus, and I was on a basketball team. I wasn't good enough to be on my high school team because I was only 6 feet tall. We had a 6'11" center. We were citywide champions. But I scored rebounds, and I helped in the practices. That was as good as I could get in terms of basketball. Anyway, I lost my train of thought.
So let's try and really narrow in. So
please.
I'm assuming you're in college. What was it about your state that made you vulnerable to joining a cult?
Right.
Let me just give you a couple options. Were you depressed? Were you lonely? Did you not have a sense of meaning and purpose? What primed you to be open to?
No, I was a creative writing major, and I was working as a banquet waiter at a holiday and the weekends to make money. I should also add, when I turned 17, I had a thing with my father where I said, because I was earning money in the hardware store, I said, I'm going to buy a motorcycle. And my father said, they're too dangerous. And I said, I can't afford a car. And he said, so if I get you a car, will you promise not to get a motorcycle? And I said, sure. And I came home one day, and he handed me keys to a gold Dodge Dart Swinger with a vinyl roof. And I was 17. And I just love cars and driving. But the point is that To answer your question, I loved women. I started dating. Like for me, I was a young kid, but my hormones were normal, and fell in love with a woman at 17, and she broke my heart, and I wrote a whole bunch of poems about that. And so what made me vulnerable? I had another girlfriend, a model, who dumped me very abruptly and rudely. And so I was kind of down about, this really sucks. I really cared about her, and is this what love is? And it really sucks. And I was in the last draft lottery to go to Vietnam. So anyway, I had been basically dumped by my girlfriend at 19.
Ah, chicks. They do it every time. Girl broke up with you. What was her name? Let's call her Debbie. Fucking Debbie.
She was a shoe model. That's all I remember.
A shoe model.
She had great legs,
Oh.
and I have no recollection of what her name is.
Oh, okay. Let's call her Debbie. So Debbie tears your heart apart and just leaves you there at this cafeteria, alone and vulnerable. Poor Steve. You're like, what now? What now? I thought.
I was just beginning the spring semester. It was February of 1974, and 3 women at the college cafeteria asked if they could
Hold
join
on one
me at my
second here.
table.
This is from Dr. Stephen Hassan's book, Combating Mind Control, the 1988 version. In the 2024 version, the updated one, it also has the same exact text. One day, as I was reading a book in the student union cafeteria, 3 attractive women of Japanese background and an Italian-American man approached me. They were dressed like students and carried books. They asked if they could share the table. I nodded and was engaged in a friendly conversation within minutes. Since I had a 3-hour break between classes, I stayed and talked. They told me they were students too, involved in a small community of, quote, young people from all over the world, end quote. They invited me to visit them. The semester had just started, and I wanted to make some new friends. So I drove to their house that night after class. When I arrived, I found a lively group of about 30 people from a half dozen countries. I asked if they were a religious group. Oh no, not at all, they laughed. They told me they were part of something called the One World Crusade, dedicated to overcoming cultural differences between people and combating just such major societal problems as the ones I was concerned about. One world where people treat each other with love and respect? I thought to myself, what idealists these people are. I enjoyed the stimulating conversations and energetic atmosphere at the meeting. These people related to each other as easily as brothers and sisters and clearly felt they were part of one global family. They seemed very happy with their lives. After my depression of the previous month, I was invigorated by all of that positive energy. I went home that night feeling lucky to have met such a nice. I went home that night to feel. Oh my goodness. I went home that night feeling lucky to have met such nice people. The next day I ran into Tony, the man who had approached me in the cafeteria. Did you enjoy your evening? He asked. I answered that I had. Well, listen, Tony said. This afternoon, Audrey, who is from Holland, is going to give a short lecture on some interesting principles of life. Why don't you come over? I listened to Audrey's lecture for a few hours. What a weird sentence structure. I listened to Audrey's lecture a few hours. Oh, there we go. I was reading it wrong. I listened to Audrey's lecture a few hours later. It seemed vague and a bit simplistic, but pleasing, and I could agree with nearly everything he said. However, the content of his speech didn't explain why everyone in the group seemed so happy all the time. I felt there must either be something wrong with me or something exceptional about them. My curiosity was fully engaged. I wound up going back the next day too. And this time, another person gave a talk about the origin of all problems that humankind has had to face. This lecture had a decidedly religious tone. It dealt with Adam and Eve and how they were corrupted by a misuse of love in the Garden of Eden. At that point, I didn't notice that my questions were never answered and didn't suspect I was being deliberately strung along. However, I did feel a bit confused and said I didn't think I'd be coming back. What he often leaves out in this story here, he always says these 3 women. These 3 women. There was also a man with them too, a young gentleman, but he never really talks about them, and you have to dig into Dr. Stephen Hassan like I have. to find where this is actually mentioned that it wasn't just these 3 women that were recruiting him. There was also a young gentleman with them, but he focuses on them so much that you miss that part of the story and what they were all discussing. But yeah, there was also a gentleman with them too whenever they were talking to Steve.
I didn't join the UC. I joined the One World Crusade, which was a front group of the Unification Church, in February of 1974. I was 19 years old. I was at Queens College. I was an upper junior studying creative writing. And I had just been dumped by my girlfriend, and I was lonely and a little bit down. And 3 very attractive Japanese women and an Italian man asked if they could share my table at the cafeteria at Queens College. And they said they were students, and they were dressed like students, and they carried books like students. I didn't find out for weeks later that they actually were lying and weren't students. So I was in between a 2-hour or 3-hour break between classes, and they asked if they could join me, and they started asking me all kinds of questions about the books that were on the table that I was using for philosophy classes and English classes. And I thought they were interested in me. So I was not looking to join a religion. I grew up in a conservative Jewish family. But it really was a step-by-step deception, seduction, incremental recruitment.
I was waiting for my next class. I had just gotten my textbooks for college. And I said, sure. And they started flirting with me, what later is called love bombing.
We also call it flirt to convert.
Yeah, well, I learned how to do that as a good Moonie. So I was not looking to join anything, and
You had your heart broken, and you were kind of lonely.
I had my heart broken, and these 3 really attractive women,
And there was a guy,
just like zoomed in on me.
The steps along the way that got you recruited. I know this is sort of setting the table for listeners.
My story is not that unusual, actually. I was victimized by a honey trap.
And 3 very attractive Japanese women and an Italian man asked if they could share my table at the cafeteria at Queens College. And they said they were students.
Those books are really, I think I had Heidegger's Being in Time. I think I had a book on the Upanishads. I had a philosophy of religion class, I believe. And
we'll talk about those books, and there's stories that Stephen tells about these 2. And again, I don't know if I'll insert it here or later on because these are so long, and with the Joe Rogan podcast as well, with all my research, this is going to have to be broken up in between what I'm discussing and things going on here. Here we go.
I worked in the Negev Desert at 17. I drove across Canada to Alaska when I was 18 with my buddy Lenny, all the way up the Alcan Highway to Alaska.
He wasn't
and
sheltered.
I was this punk 19-year-old who thought I knew it all, and like no one could
He
mess with my
experienced the
mind.
United States and
It didn't
Canada.
even enter my consciousness that there was any danger at all. My father made a big mistake. When I was in the hardware store, he said, Steve, you can always know when people are lying by checking out their eyes. When they're lying, their eyes are going to be shifty. These women looked me dead in the eyes and lied their faces off.
And 3 very attractive Japanese women and an Italian man asked if they could share my table at the cafeteria at Queens College. And they said they were students.
Okay, so you had your heart broken, and then 3 cute young girls. What was their pitch? They were
No,
movies.
it was like, you're fascinating. You're
gosh,
so
the fact that he
smart.
doesn't
You're
mention
so
that there's another guy
good-looking.
there,
You're,
too.
just
Like it was a group.
love bombing kinds of things, and I was very vulnerable because I was down.
I will
And
definitely put that in
like,
here.
What's going on? This really sucks.
So what happened next?
So they basically said, are you doing anything tonight? No. Would you like to come over and have dinner and meet some of our friends from all over the world? Sure. Here's the address. And I didn't understand what this group was. No one had heard of the Moonies by then, by the way, in February of 74. I should also.
This is not true either. And if you listen to, oh gosh, how many episodes did I do? The background on the Moonies before we got here. I'm up to episode 7 on my podcast. 2 of those are on going to the Tucker Carlson event. So 5 episodes of background on the Moonies. So that is just false right there. He hadn't heard of the Moonies, but it's not that nobody had heard of the Moonies. So that's not true.
Oh, Ed, it was the same month Patty Hearst was abducted by the
He loves linking
Sudanese
Patty Hearst to
Liberation
this.
Army, just
Loves
for
it.
those people thinking historical contexts. And basically, I arrived at this house. There were about 30 people there. There were people from Holland, Germany, the UK, Japan, Korea, Australia, and probably a few other European countries. And we sat on a wooden floor as food was served. And then later in the evening, our friend from Holland is giving a talk. Would you like to listen? Again, I had no antenna up that this is a cult and they're trying to recruit me. It was like, would you like to meet our friend? So sure. I'm generally open-minded and want to learn and experience different people. So I listened to this lecture, and it was weird because people in the room were like falling asleep as the guy was talking. And I'm sitting there, and some people are like hitting themselves. And that was really weird. And I don't have a lot of memory of the content of that talk.
Essentially, I was radicalized when I was 19 years old, the same month that Patty Hearst was abducted by the Sudanese Liberation Army. I was an upper junior at Queens College, and Heidi's correct. I grew up like 1.3 miles from Donald Trump. He was on the wealthy side of Union Turnpike. I was on the small attached houses side where you could hear the neighbors flush their toilet. But anyway, my girlfriend dumped me abruptly, and I was kind of blue and starting the spring semester, and I had just purchased all my books for the spring semester, and 3 women came and started flirting with me and asked me to sit at my table. It's a long story. I describe it in Combating Cult Mind Control, my first book that came out in 1988. I was kind of bummed, and I was sitting in the cafeteria waiting for the new semester to start, and 3 women pretending to be students, dressed like students, carrying books like students, asked if they can share my table, and they started asking me about the books that I had from my course.
And they weren't students?
No, they were Moonies.
Wow.
And it was a deceptive, systematic, which I later learned how to do as a leader. I learned how to recruit people. And
sitting at this table, these girls come over. They weren't even students, right? So what are they doing in the school? How'd they get in?
They lied. They just walked in. Queens College was City University.
Damn shitty security. Probably can't do that today.
And not only,
I thought she was going to be the one. And these gals come over, and were they hot?
They were cute, and they were very flirtatious. They didn't say, by the way, masturbation is a sin, and Father's going to line us up with thousands of people in a sign who you're going to marry, and you have to wait 4 years to have sex with them.
Is that the Moonies?
Yeah.
Is that how they do it?
Yeah.
4 years.
They didn't say anything about that whatsoever. And I said, are you part of some religious group? Oh, no, not at all. We're just a group of students, who are concerned about modern issues.
So, what was their approach to you? They sat down, they started talking to you. What did they open up with? Hey, nice glasses.
No, I think I had. It was the spring semester. I had a pile of books. I was taking philosophy, psychology, and writing. I think I had the Upanishads. I think I had Heidegger's Being in Time, and they're like, "Why being in time is that thick?" Oh, wow, you must be really smart.
Oh.
What is that about?
Oh, so they start flattering you, buttering you up.
Oh, serious
serious.
Yeah.
The cult is known, and other cults are known as love bombing.
Pretty sure that Puerto Rican girl did to me too. Damn, she was hot, Steve.
It's all about saving the person's soul and, step-by-step incremental recruitment, finding out as much as you can about the person, saying almost nothing about what you are about and what the group is about.
Well, so I want to take you back to the cafeteria, if you don't mind. So you're sitting in this cafeteria. These girls come up to you. They start flattering you. They're flirting with you. And then what's the next step?
So they're part of an international group of students who are trying to make the world a better place. They happen to have a house, kind of like a commune, which was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Would I like to come over for dinner? So it was the free dinner.
What'd they cook?
I have no recollection. And it's interesting because back then I was feeding them all the information about myself, how I thought, what my values were, what my interests were. So I was telling them how to manipulate me.
You say
in this day and age, you can go on the internet and read people's Facebooks and all their posts, and you don't even need to ask them.
You say this, right, but I'm assuming the girls you're talking about are not much older than you, right?
Right.
So weren't they being manipulated themselves? Weren't they essentially a part of this whole thing, and in that they were really victims along the same way they were making you a victim, like they were bitten by the vampire?
It's the victim-victimizer model,
right.
And their cult identities were suppressing. They were sent away from Japan, from their family and friends, and they were
Japanese chicks?
Yeah, they were Japanese chicks. And they were
Asian
hot.
chicks.
Really
That's what's up.
Let's go over.
I almost feel like I need a shower after listening to Stephen and Joe Rogan talk about these women that recruited Stephen on campus. It's like Stephen is using them as like the siren song, reminiscent of the sirens from Homer's Odyssey and Ulysses, and them drawing them closer to, the shores, to wreck the ships. And, it makes for a better story over the years. And that's why Stephen has it in his books originally. And he'll include Tony, the Italian man that was there. And then he drops it in the Cult of Trump, and he starts dropping it from his stories. It doesn't make for such a great tale of being recruited when you include the Italian man and you talk about Tony contacting you the next day and saying, hey, why don't you come back? And, sure, those women, Stephen was attracted to, and he mentions that, and, hoping to get a date, but it was kind of a group, recruitment tactic that they were doing, and they did go out in groups. And I find it kind of gross that he's done this over the years, and I can see why. And I feel even more kind of turned off by his story that he does this in this manner with Joe Rogan. And yeah, and again, I keep going back to your story in itself is impactful. You don't need to take away or add things to it to make it more impactful. And if you pay attention, and I've shown this in other areas that I've discussed, Stephen talks in one of his videos, he's talking to second generation Moonies, and he tells the honest, truthful story about Tony being there and getting recruited. And then he'll tailor his responses with Joe Rogan to be more misogynistic. And then when he goes on other shows, he turns down the misogyny a little bit. So he tailors his responses and things of that manner. And he doesn't need to. His story in itself is enough. What he went through was traumatic. It was an experience that many of us will never face and hopefully never will have to face. And I don't know why he does this. I can take some guesses and I have some opinions, but he doesn't need to.
Biggest memory was people falling asleep, and then afterward, when the lecturer asked me what I thought, I said, what's up with the people who are falling asleep? And you wouldn't understand, which of course makes you more curious if somebody says something like that. Well, this teaching is really powerful, and there are forces that don't want people to know this material. That's what he said to me.
The people are falling asleep because of evil, unseen forces.
Didn't use the word evil, but spiritual forces. That was the word of spiritual. But again, the frame was, we're not part of a religious group. They were very congruently lying to me that
they told you flat out they're not a religious
correct.
group?
And I don't know why I even asked the question, but obviously it was in my mind. I have a very clear memory of asking them, oh, no, not at all. And I was looking at their eyes. Are they lying? And it was like, nope, they're on the level.
How did your indoctrination happen?
It was a whole series of things that happened.
It's just kind of like a step-by-step.
But I need to explain to you that I worked as a banquet waiter on the weekends at the Holiday Inn. And so sometimes it was a wedding, sometimes it was some other function. Each weekend was a different time to report. Sometimes it was a Friday night or a Saturday or a Sunday. And they started talking about, we're all going away this on the weekend. You have to join us. And I was like, I work, sorry. And they're like, oh, but you're going to miss out. And it's like, too bad. That's, I've worked every weekend for 2 years, and I need to make my money, get my gas money and whatever. And they just kept repeating it. And I said, listen, I work. If sometime I don't have to work, then I'll come. That was a mistake that I said that, because 2 days later, I called my boss up. What time do you need me? Oh, the wedding was canceled. Take the weekend off. Never happened before. So I'm like, wait a minute. I wasn't that suspicious or whatever, but I was like, I don't know, this is really weird, a synchronicity or something, and maybe I'm meant to go to this weekend together. So, and I had given my word, if I don't have to work, and I'm a person of my word.
And they were cute young women.
They were cute, yeah. But so yes, and I didn't have anything to do that weekend, and I drove to the house, and I got into their van, and it went to a location I didn't know. This is way before cell phones, so nobody knew where I was going. I didn't know where I was going. And as we're driving into this multi-million-dollar estate in Tarrytown, at the front of the van, they say, oh, by the way, this weekend we're having a joint workshop with the Unification Church. And I went, church? This isn't religious. Workshop? Nobody said anything about a workshop. I want to go back. Oh, what's wrong, Steve? Are you scared or something?
Could have been out.
Well, I'm not scared, but I want to go back. Like, didn't want to be part of a workshop or do something with church. I'm Jewish. I'm not interested. And they're like, do you have a thing against Christians? So they did a typical mind controller, turn it around on you. That it's your problem versus, no, they lied to me, the women who recruited me. And I said, I want to go back. Oh, I'm sorry, we're not going back, now, but we'll go in the morning. We'll drive you back in the morning. Why don't you come in and we'll get you in the morning. So then I go in, there's a fireplace, people are singing folk songs, things that I grew up. I didn't mention I went to sleepaway camp during the summers when I was a child. So I had some individuation and got to be in the woods and learn how to canoe and swim and all these other things in summer camp. But it reminded me of summer camp, like, get around, sing, 500 miles and, this land is your land, other Peter, Paul, and Mary types of songs. And the people seemed very nice, but I wanted to leave, and I didn't have a way to leave. In retrospect, I would have went out and hitchhiked in the snow in a dark road. Get me out of here. But I didn't realize I was in danger. So the morning comes. I didn't sleep well because there was a lot of noise. It was a group male dormitory type situation with sleeping bags, etc. And I come down. Okay, I'm ready to go. Oh, the van left. So sorry. well, why don't you just go have breakfast and, I'll see what we can do. And it was just like this one thing after another that was just delaying. And I wound up staying for 2 days. The end of the second night, I'm like, okay, I have class in the morning.
Ready to
go
go.
back to Queens. And they're like, oh, no, there's a third day. You don't want to miss the third day, do you? And I'm like, I have class in the morning. I want to go back. Like, drive me. And so they worked on me for, I don't know, an hour or two, persuaded me that I would regret it for the rest of my life if I didn't hear the conclusion of the workshop. So I stayed a third day, missed a day of class.
What was the general substance of the workshops?
So the Moonies ideology is called the divine principle. I later became a lecturer and recruiter for this, so I know the theology quite well. And the workshop lectures it was very organized. I would say there were 3 believers to 1 newcomer. But you
a lot of
didn't know
background
that.
I did on this too. If you listen to the first
didn't
couple
know that
episodes of how this developed.
Oh, absolutely.
Creating the appearance of.
Correct. And then there were groups of sheeps and goats. They wanted the good people they wanted to really hone in on, and each had a team leader, and then there was a spy person, and they would meet in the evenings. I didn't know this at the time, but like I said, I became a leader and I understood the methodology. And so there would be discussions on like what's going on. They would ask everyone to write a reflection sheet after each evening. So there would be these discussions on how we're going to get to Steve or how we're going to get to Mary or whatever. And they would orchestrate conversations in between the lectures and the workshops and the fun sports activities that were worked into the day. You were never left alone. Even if you had to go to the bathroom, someone spontaneously needed to pee also at the same moment. But I didn't realize this all at the same time at that moment. In any case.
So the theology.
The theology was like, if there is a God, then God's creation would be perfect, but it's not. So, like, what happened? What went wrong? And there was a whole theology about God as masculine and feminine and give and take action and what was called the 4-position foundation. There was a lot of gobbledygook in retrospect, but it was presented with such seriousness as if this is the ideology that will explain everything. In fact, later they would call it the completed testament, the Old Testament, the New Testament, and the completed testament. Why? Because all of human history was to serve the coming of the Messiah on earth, to complete the original Garden of Eden goal that God wanted to create, the perfect expression of his love.
So it was rooted in the Holy Bible.
Oh, yeah. There was a lot that was cherry picked. I mean, after I got out, I did a deep dive to understand theology, talking with Jewish theologians, Christian theologians, etc. But I didn't have any exposure to Christianity, so I really didn't know. And any talk of Jesus didn't work for me. Like, I didn't have a big negative, but it was like not my worldview that I was operating from. But the idea, the Jews do have an idea of a Moshiach, or the Messiah, but the Jewish presentation of that person is a person who brings peace, not someone who is God in human form or anything else. But like, there will be a good ending. God will send a good person that will bring an ending. So the idea that was put to me was, and I'll give you a quick demo of the final minutes of a 3-day workshop of the Moonies. If you'd like, I can go into that.
This is oh, what a pause. if this is what I remember correctly, because I've watched this several times, this is interesting to say the least.
That. So the lecturer would, and I should say the whole workshop was up and down emotional states and a lot of hypnotic stuff where they were asking people to visualize an ideal world or visualize all the starving children on earth, etc. The feedback sheet for me, the end of the third day, was I am too blown away to write anything now. That was as much as, because what I, again, in analyzing after the fact, I was overloaded emotionally, psychologically. I didn't know what was up or what was down. But the rap was something like this, and the guy would be pacing back and forth. So, you've been hearing a lot of very deep, profound things in the last 3 days. And maybe, just maybe, it's a pile of rubbish.
Maybe.
But on the other hand, what if? What if? What if it's true? Could you just walk away? Let us pray. Heavenly Father, Father, we are your children, Father. Please open up our hearts, Father. The world is suffering. And for 40 minutes,
yes,
50 minutes, an
that
hour.
Happened.
And then people would be broken up into small groups to pressure them to stay for the 7-day workshop.
This interview is
that
wild.
Starts the next morning. And I had already made up my mind. I'm leaving. Like, whatever they say or do, I'm out of here. This is too much. I thought I was going to have a fun weekend. What the hell's going on here? And I went home. My mother said, "Where have you been? We've been so worried about you." I don't know. I was in upstate New York at this multi-million-dollar mansion. She said, "You look like you're on drugs. Were you doing drugs?" And I was like, "I don't think they gave me any drugs." And my mother said, "Let's go talk to the rabbi. Let's go talk to the rabbi." I said, "Sure." So we went to my temple. We talked to the rabbi. The rabbi had no clue about cults whatsoever. He thought I was interested in becoming a Christian. My question was, is there going to be a Messiah that's coming? Because part of the push is that, we're coming to the end of the world history, and we're going to be, the world is going to be divided, and God's going to restore his perfect creation, and you don't want to miss it. Like, if you go back to college and write poetry and the Messiah's on the earth and this monumental war against communism and Satan is going to happen. I didn't believe in Satan growing up. I should be very clear about that. Jews don't believe in Satan or demons or evil spirit or heaven or hell either, honestly, because I forgot to mention all of that. I just want to know, is that there's a Messiah coming, and how do we know? And he was useless. What he should have said to me is, "Steve, I've never heard of this group, but I can assure you if it's legitimate, it will stand up to scrutiny. Promise me you won't go back or interact with them for the next few weeks, and let's try to find out who they are, what they believe, and what's about them." Like, that's what he should have said. I would have been very happy with that answer, and I would have been very cooperative. But I was back at home, back in school, going, what if? And then I had what I thought was a spiritual experience. I was sitting in my bedroom. I had a whole group of...
This is interesting, too, and I'm pretty sure this is where he's going to mention that his neighbor growing up was in a cult. Yeah, this is interesting. And you won't get this in any other interviews with Dr. Hassan. And at least any I've come through, and I've been looking into him for Oh, gosh, I really have to go back and look when I did the first space on him, our Thursday spaces, but I've been digging into the background and everything to make sure I was thorough. But yeah, you won't catch this story anywhere else.
Books on the floor. Some of them were open. One of them was a book about Ouspensky and Gurdjieff, which I didn't mention.
Ouspensky and Gurdjieff. We will talk about that. George Gurdjieff, he was a Greek Armenian philosopher, mystic, spiritual teacher, composer, and movements teacher. He taught that people are not conscious of themselves and thus live their lives in a state of hypnotic waking sleep, but that it is possible to awaken to a higher state of consciousness and serve our purpose as human beings. The practice of his teachings has become known as the work, and his student Ouspensky referred to it as the fourth way. And Ouspensky did eventually become disillusioned with Gurdjieff, but this is what Stephen Hassan is referring to here as we continue on.
Before, but I was reading all kinds of philosophy books. Next door neighbor was in what turned out to be a cult called the Gurdjieff Foundation. So as I was growing up, he was brilliant. He he's a very warm and loving man.
So he was already around somebody who was in a cult.
People are walking around asleep and how we can work to elevate ourselves.
I think Stephen was susceptible all along,
human beings,
before he ever met the Moonies.
So I read all these books, and I just grabbed a book. It was by Ouspensky, In Search of the Miraculous, and I just the paragraph that my eyes focused on said something about how Gurdjieff was a pivotal person in human history because he was alive on Earth. And I'm reading this going, but he's dead, and maybe the Messiah is coming. They didn't say it was Sun Myung Moon, by the way. This was like weeks later before they revealed
I think this is
that.
really important. I'm just going to back this up just a little bit.
All kinds of books. I was sitting in my bedroom. I had a whole group of books on the floor. Some of them were open. One of them was a book about Ouspensky and Gurdjieff, which I didn't mention before, but I the philosophy books.
Since I was
and my next door
5,
neighbor
6, 7,
was
8.
in what turned out to be a cult called the. So as I was growing up, he was brilliant. He he's a very warm and loving man. Was talking about how people are walking around asleep and how we can work on our consciousness to elevate ourselves to become, better human beings. So I had read all these books, and I just grabbed a book. It was by Ouspensky, In Search of the Miraculous, and I just the paragraph that my eyes focused on said something about how Gurdjieff was a pivotal person in human history because he was alive on Earth. And I'm reading this going, but he's dead, and maybe the Messiah is coming. They didn't say it was Sun Myung Moon, by the way. This was like weeks later before they revealed that. So again, I had this experience, and I was like, am I supposed to learn more about this group? And the appeal wasn't to devote my life. The appeal was to find out more.
From Combating Cult Mind Control by Dr. Stephen Hassan. This is the updated version, 2024. This is Stephen on his next door neighbor. I had always been an avid reader. During that time, I began to read a great deal of psychology and philosophy. My neighbor next door, a mathematician, introduced me to the writings of G.I. Gurdjieff and P.D. Ouspensky. I became interested in what was presented as ancient esoteric knowledge. Much of what I read described humanity's natural condition as being asleep to the truth and in need of someone more spiritually advanced to teach us about the higher levels of consciousness. The suggestion that one should join a spiritual school was embedded in those books. Now, I want to preface, before I read these two different versions from Combating Mind Control, the 1988 to the most recent version, that books go through editing over the years and updates. and things of that nature. I completely understand that. I'm just presenting this to show how the versions have changed. And previously, what I had just presented, it also changed. The neighbor's not mentioned in the earlier ones. It's just Steve was reading these books. The neighbor's never mentioned. You don't even know that they exist. So as we proceed here. This is the original 1988 version of his aha kind of sign moment. After several earnest days of prayer, I received what I thought was the sign. Unable to concentrate on any schoolwork, I was sitting on the edge of my bed. I reached down, picked up one of my philosophy books, and opened it to a paragraph at random, which said that history goes through certain cycles to help human beings evolve to a higher plane. At that moment, I thought I had a spiritual experience. How could I have a chance to open a book to that paragraph? I thought that God was surely signaling to me to heed Mr. Miller's lectures. I felt I had to go back and learn more about this movement. Now, this is from Combating Mind Control, the 2024 version. After several earnest days of prayer, I received what I thought was the sign. Unable to concentrate on my schoolwork, I was sitting on the edge of my bed. I reached down, picked up an Ouspensky book, and opened it to a paragraph at random, which said that history goes through certain cycles to help human beings evolve to a higher plane. At that moment, I believed I had a spiritual experience. How could I have chanced to open the book to that paragraph? I thought that God was surely signaling me to heed Mr. Miller's lectures. I felt I had to go back and learn more about this movement. I really think he was susceptible already to this.
So I looked at that. I thought, maybe I need to go back this weekend and listen again, because it seemed like the first weekend, it seemed very childish and simplistic to me. I was very resistant to it. But they kind of broke me down over the days. But now I'm volunteering to go back a second time, and at that point, I did the deep dive into believing that maybe I'm at this chosen person at this major moment in human history, and I'm supposed to help save the world and make the world a better place. And
you said there was a spiritual experience?
That's what it felt like. I didn't label it a spiritual experience. If anything, it was more like, maybe there's something bigger going on here, and I'm meant to go.
And that was sitting in your room, or where were you?
I was sitting in my bedroom, and I picked up this book. But
that had nothing to do with Moonies.
It had nothing to do with. It had to do with another cult,
right,
which I didn't realize was a cult.
Right.
But what I'm trying to convey is that I should never have gotten into this group. If that wedding was never canceled, I never would have gone. I'm sure I never would have gone.
Lack of informed consent.
And the 7-day workshop, and they worked on me for hours trying to persuade me. And you need to get angry and assertive because if you cave, then you'll do whatever they tell you to do. Because I know that, because I became a leader and I used to do this on people to recruit them. But I became a true believer and a model true believer, to the point where I was held up as the future of the group.
So it sounds like
we'll discuss that later too.
You're in your exploratory years as a young adult. Here. You got dumped. You were probably longing for community and friends.
I had friends. I had community.
Girls.
I wanted to have a girlfriend, and I liked sex a lot.
So you were looking for a girl, but then they made you feel.
I'm sorry. This is going to be a theme too. You'll notice in his interview with on the Mormon Stories podcast is sex. I like sex a lot. Like it's consistent in the females and and the way he talks about it is very childlike. I don't need new tires, but stay tuned for the next episode.
We're going to have to be smart. We're going to have to be strategic. We're going to have to be aggressive.
I'm an alpha guy.
I'll flip a table every time you aren't getting by.
Let's go. Just push.
It's all psychological warfare.
I'm not part of QAnon.
We know what they are doing.
For Trump.
If shit goes wrong, like, I will literally have to leave the country.
Stop that.
I'll land my initial plane.
Okay, high five. This isn't the hi-fi show.
Good night. Good night. Nighty night.